I'm Michael. I'm the founding product engineer at HR, which came out of the YC Winner 24 batch. And essentially, we're trying to solve the problem of automating HR across many different clients. So typically, if you're a really small company, you tend to not really have your own HR person or an HR expert who's helping you. You could likely go to some sort of fractional HR solution, a traditional HR firm that is able to help you with your compliance needs. So whether it be I-9 verifications, or I just hired a new employee in Delaware, but I'm not registered in that state. If you don't even know all of that, that's totally normal. But the reality is that all this HR compliance is going to catch up to you in the form of penalties, fines, all sorts of negative consequences. So essentially at HR, what we're trying to do is we're trying to capture this market of businesses, small businesses that are just starting out, or startups that are starting out. Even if you come out of YC, you're not necessarily outfitted with the HR compliance knowledge to fully register in a completely new state or to complete an I-9 verification. All of this HR bureaucracy and nuance is quite difficult to navigate, and I think you'd rather focus on your own business as opposed to figure all that out. So that's essentially what we're trying to solve.
Thanks so much. Yeah, that sounds like a really good, problem solution fit. I'm really interested in your story. Can you tell us a little bit about why you started to work on this venture? What factors in your background made you want to do this?
Yeah. So I started off as a rather traditional software engineer. I was still very much geared towards working at startups. And before working at HR, I was working as a software engineer, but as a contractor for the Yale School of Medicine. And I remember very distinctly, I was on track to becoming hired as a full-time employee, but then Yale's HR ultimately had a snafu. They were like, oh, actually we don't cover California because of all the regulations and benefits there. So I remember initially being very, very pissed off at Yale's HR department, but thinking, okay, wow, there is a lot of bureaucracy around HR practices, around hiring practices. What are the nuances around that? And that was around the time that HR reached out to me, and I was very curious of their value proposition, what they did in the HR space, and I realized, oh wow, a lot of this HR automation, a lot of trying to demystify and solve a lot of the issues that companies go through when it concerns hiring as well as firing employees. I think that became really interesting.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about what that specific value proposition is, and what differentiates your company from anything else out there?
Yeah, so we are a tech HR firm. I think first and foremost, we provide HR services. So one might wonder, how does that distinguish us from a typical HR fractional firm? And I think the answer lies in the tech that we build, the automations that we build to ultimately simplify a lot of these repeatable and tedious use cases. So one example would be entering a new employee in an HRIS system. So an HRIS system is usually ties in payroll. So you can think of something like Gusto or Rippling. That's where employees go to figure out, I got paid. This is where I download my pay stubs. But then beyond that, it's a lot of different tools, whether it be hiring, figuring out benefits, and making sure that you're compliant, so to speak. So make sure that you have all your state registrations and your tax forms, putting that all in one service. And you might be wondering, well, Gus and Rippling, they probably handle these services, but oftentimes they really don't. They kind of just leave it up to the customers to handle all of that. So where an HR fractional firm will have a human delegated to that ultimately becomes a scaling problem. How do we scale such that we're able to handle many, many different businesses while augmenting the abilities of our own HR folks? And I think the answer to that is building out these workflows that are oftentimes not super structured data, and getting API access to Rippling or Gusto can be very prohibitive. So we've built out browser automations, AI tooling that ultimately automates away a lot of the tedium.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're working on all these different tech solutions for this HR problem. Can you talk a little bit about what the business model is, and like what do you do to get revenue? What's your go-to-market strategy?
Yeah, so I think we use a subscription service. So on a monthly basis, based on your headcount of both W-2 employees, so your full-time employees, as well as your 1099s, so those are your contractors, we calculate headcount price and ultimately factor in a monthly subscription model. So that's how we usually price things. And we initially started off by onboarding a lot of smaller companies, but realized that the ACV, the annual contract value for a lot of these companies were just too small and we were operating at a loss. So we've been going for a lot of growing companies. So these are companies that might start off small, but will end up with a much higher headcount by the end of the year or on a year-over-year basis. And we've been getting a lot more of those types of clientele. So then in terms of the GTM, well, I'm an engineer, but I actually worked quite a bit on GTM for a couple of months to help out my founder. And essentially, my taste of GTM, I'm not the biggest fan of GTM. I don't really like, well, sometimes I like selling things, but in this case, there was a lot of experimenting with different types of clientele. So I think especially in the AI startup world, there have been a lot of different ways that you can do GTM. You come up with a hypothesis of, okay, where else would PMF apply to some of these different industries? So for a time we were thinking, oh, maybe dental offices, they tend to also abstract a lot of the HR services away to these fractional HR firms. What if we tried emailing a bunch of them and seeing if they would be interested? Ultimately, that didn't really go anywhere, but a lot of what we did was sourcing through either LinkedIn or there's a tool called Clay that's been pretty hot nowadays, where it essentially uses AI to scrape a lot of like LinkedIn and other sources for like people that you can ultimately outreach. And then we essentially, there have also been some emerging AI emailing solutions that will essentially take your sample of contacts and then send off emails in an email campaign. And you can even A/B test certain campaigns to kind of test what has more engagement. But yeah, a lot of that has been happening. A lot of LinkedIn outreach nowadays as well. So yeah, GTM has been very variable. It's also been going through a lot of evolution as AI has been taking over more of Silicon Valley.
I'm taking this class with a bunch of young aspiring entrepreneurs at Berkeley. If you could give one piece of advice to this group of young aspiring entrepreneurs, what advice would you give?
Wow. Okay. Well, so y'all go to Berkeley. I think you guys are very close to AI, to Silicon Valley, to a lot of this hype around things like OpenClaw or OpenAI, Anthropic, all of these different AI tooling. But I think it's really important, and I've gone through many similar cycles of reflection while building with AI tooling. I think it's important to realize your dependence on AI. Since AI has become so prevalent in whether it be using Claude Code to maybe finish some assignments or to vibe code out an entire thing, it is important to ultimately make sure that there's still humanity in the process, whether it be yourself or to take into account, ultimately I'm building all this tooling out, this automation out, not just to make the lives of my clients easier, but also for the people that I'm building this for at Dyna HR. Well, beyond just Dyna HR, I think it's really important to really consider the human element.